Welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Lisa Ashford and I'm CEO of Ethex and Energize Africa, which are two positive investing platforms. I'm joined today by Barbara Hammond and Saskia Huggins from Low Carbon Hub and Mark Hodgson from CoCars. Hello and welcome.
Hi.
These are just two of the brilliant social enterprises that we help to raise finance on our platform, who will introduce themselves shortly. And this is the first of our soon-to-be regular Cuppa clubs. So I hope you've got your Cuppa to hand. And we will give people the opportunity to meet the businesses, ask some questions. And obviously the first thing I have to say is, why haven't we done this before? It seems like a really sensible thing to do. So I hope you find it useful, and I will just give you an outline of the format for today. So I will set the context first, and then each business will introduce themselves for about 10 minutes or so, and then we will open up for questions. We have about 45 minutes scheduled, but we can run to an hour if there are lots of questions. You can submit your questions via the chat function, and I will take those questions and feed them into the relevant business to answer. And lastly, before I get started, I just obviously need to say that this discussion should not be treated as financial advice in any way. We can't answer any specific questions relating to your own personal finance circumstances. And this isn't a recommendation to invest. This is purely a showcase of both organisations, and there's a lot more information on the Ethex website. So if you'd like to follow up after the session, you know where to go. So if Barbara, Saskia and then Mark would like to quickly say hello in that order, then I'll set the context and then we'll get going.
Hi everyone, I'm Barbara Hammond. I'm CEO of the Low Carbon Hub.
Hi, I'm Saskia Huggins. I'm the Social Impact Director at the Low Carbon Hub.
And hi, I'm Mark Hodgson. I'm the Managing Director of CoCars.
Lovely, thank you very much. So you may have seen that I wrote a blog at the start of the lockdown, which was called At Times Like This. And it was written fairly quickly, but it came from the heart and it captured my mood at the time. How should we position ourselves at this time, and would people still be interested in positive investing? My hope was that actually people would use this as an opportunity and a time to consider what they want for the future of their community. And I mean that both at a micro level and also at a macro level. And this has been quite obviously an unprecedented time where communities that perhaps weren't previously united have come together to support one another. And this sense of community, when paired with a desire to reduce climate change and build a more sustainable future, I feel is quite a powerful movement. In addition, there are those who have managed to maintain their income at the moment, and they may have been spending less due to not spending on travel or spending less money on social activities. And a government poll recently suggested that there's 61% of people are spending less at the moment. And this brings about opportunities potentially to think about what to do with that money, and brings opportunities potentially to save and or invest that money, or indeed donate. And let's not forget, there are many people currently under enormous financial strain at the moment as well. And as a side note, we are raising donations for a really great organisation that is helping to distribute food parcels for those people in need at the moment. So let's not forget that. Lastly, of course, we've got a very volatile stock market, and crude oil is trading at negative $40 a barrel, or was last week, which, you know, is literally the hashtag keep it in the ground, in action. And we have very low interest rates, which may continue for quite some time. So considering other types of investments which diversify your risk and have significant positive impact may be worth finding out more about. And so that's why we're here. So without further ado, I shall hand over to the Low Carbon Hub, which is the first of our organisations who are helping to build a more sustainable future. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. If you bear with me one moment, I'm just going to pop some slides up. And you don't need to look at us the whole time. So thank you so much. Sorry, I just need to sort out my slides for a moment. Just almost there. There we go. Thank you so much, Lisa. Just so pleased that so many of you were able to spare the time to sit down with a cup of tea and learn a little bit about ourselves and co-cars today. So thank you very much for that. For those of you who don't know us, the Low Carbon Hub is an Oxfordshire-based social enterprise that's out to try and prove it is possible to meet our energy needs in a way that is good for people and good for the planet. And I'm going to take the first few minutes of this presentation to tell you a little bit about ourselves and in particular the Community Energy Fund that we've set up, and then hand over to my colleague Barbara, who's going to tell you about a really exciting new project we're working on and why it is we're raising investment at the moment. So the Community Energy Fund is something that we've set up to help people put their savings to work, supporting local solutions that are tackling this global issue we're still facing called the climate crisis. And this is how it works. People invest in us and we use their money to invest in small scale community and renewables. So for example, here's a solar array at Middle Barton Primary School. It's a 10 kilowatt array, 40 solar panels. And between them, they are generating around 20% of the school's energy needs. We're selling that green electricity to the schools. So first of all, it's reducing their carbon footprint. We're selling it to them at a discount. So they're saving money on their energy bills. So that means that they've got more money to spend on important things like education. And then from that income, we're able to offer our investors an interest payment as a thank you for giving us the capital to make this possible in the first place. So this array at Middle Barton is just one of 45 renewable energy installations we've got around the county, mostly solar PV, roof mounted, but also the largest hydro on the Thames, just south of us here in Oxford at Sandford. So these are all generating electricity, and together in an average year, they're producing enough power to generate almost 1,500 homes. So in terms of good for the planet, that's immediately reducing our community's carbon footprint. I also said good for people. There are investor members who are getting a decent return for entrusting their savings with us when they invest in the hub. Those host organisations, it's those different solar panels are now generating so much electricity that last year alone we saved our hosts £60,000 on their electricity bills. That's money, as I said, can go back into the important task of education rather than paying for the electricity that they're using. But most excitingly from our perspective, it's 100% of all our surpluses then get reinvested in further carbon cutting action in our community. A large chunk of that goes as grants. We are part owned by 26 different community shareholder groups across the county. These are volunteer low carbon groups who are out there doing a huge range of really exciting projects in their communities, and we offer them small to medium-sized grants to support their work. So in this slide, I've just got 3 examples of projects that we've supported recently. A number of community groups in Oxford have been collaborating on a project called Kids Can, which is about helping communicate climate change to particularly primary school children in a way that's not overwhelming, in a way that makes them feel like they can actually take positive action rather than just being a big scary thing. So the Kids Can project is one of the things we were really proud to support. groups in East Oxford were working together to provide thermal imaging training so that they could help local residents identify where they could become more energy efficient. And then projects like Cecilia, who has been working on a massive project on her local community centre. Not only has it been putting in solar panels, but also looking how that they can combine EVs, batteries to make a really sort of sustainable community centre in the heart of their community. So as well as the grants, we're providing really practical support. We run a help desk for anyone interested in learning more about community energy. That's for people right across the country, in fact beyond. We're often being asked about the way that we operate from groups right around the world. And we're providing practical support in the forms of energy audits for small and medium enterprises, for schools, and for more community buildings, because alongside generating electricity, also the most important thing we can be doing is using it more efficiently in the first place. So in total, the community benefit that we've generated since our inception in 2012 is now over £400,000. But then we use that to leverage further grants and support. The bottom of the screen, the £536,000 is actually the total amount that we were able to spend in just one financial year because of the way that we use our funding to support match funding from government grants. And I'm going to hand over to Barbara to tell you a little bit more about a really exciting project that not only our community benefit, but in fact all of the projects that we're doing are being used to match a really big government grant called Project Leo.
Marvellous. Thanks, Saskia. So I think one of the things that we've realised over the last couple of years is that not only can our community benefit surplus directly help communities, but we can also leverage it by matching it with other sources of funding to make an even bigger impact. And we've done that with the European Regional Development Fund project that has funded startup SMEs and helped SMEs with energy audits and energy efficiency grants. And that's been amazing. Project Leo, on the other hand, is about helping to make happen a whole system change using Oxfordshire as the sort of test bed or the living laboratory for that. And I think I'm just really proud that as a community energy social enterprise, we've got to the point where we can believably provide the match funding for a project as big as that, and indeed be the catalyst for that project, because we know so many people, we're networked in an ecosystem with so many people in the county, to the extent where Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks, who are on this slide as one of the partners, is the lead partner. And suddenly, after 10 years of trying to get them interested in what we were doing, have switched on to us. And we're working with them sort of hand in glove now as they plan their transition from distribution network operator to distribution systems operator. So Project Leo, and the Leo means Local Energy Oxfordshire, is about how we transition the grid in Oxfordshire to zero carbon, to accommodate zero carbon. It's about how we go from this almost current situation. This used to be our big power station in Oxfordshire, Didcot. All of the cooling towers that you can see on that slide have now been blown up. And Didcot A power station, which is the coal-fired power station, is completely decommissioned. It has completely disappeared. One of the things about energy transition, people think that it's a really hard thing to do. The nice story about this, apart from the horrid story about the people dying when the building collapsed, of course, was that the same person switched it on as then 40 years later switched it off again. So this is energy transition actually happening. Big changes to the energy system have always been happening. This is just the next stage. And we think it's complicated now, but it's a whole lot less complicated to think about now than it was when the feed-in tariff started 10 years ago. So we think we know technically, if you could move on to the next slide, Saskia, how we go from a very decentralized fossil-based energy system based around big fleet of power stations like Didcot to a zero carbon, completely decentralized electricity grid. And that's the main thing, that we will be powered by electricity, we'll be heated by electricity, our transport will be powered by electricity. What we found with Project Leo so far is that technically how you fit all of this stuff together isn't that difficult. We've got all the technologies. The issue is about how you manage that, how you make sure that the grid doesn't is managed so that the loads don't blow up the substations, and then managing it so that the grid is kept safe. How do you do that in a way where the flexibility is provided to allow the grid to operate in that way, with massive decentralized energy resources on it, and without having to put masses of investment into new wires in the ground and new switches? How do you do all of that in a way that pays the people to provide those flexibility services, and which provides them with a fair contract? And the other thing for us, and the reason why we're involved in this, and we're such a key part of it, we feel, is to work out how to make the change to that sort of energy system, that sort of smart local energy market, in a way that meets all three legs of the energy trilemma. And the third one is the most difficult one, which is about energy equity, about how you give fair and free access to those markets for everybody, but also how you deliver fair benefits from that market to those people who have no assets to bid into that market. And so one of the main things that we're doing with Project Leo, as well as working with all of the big brains at the university, the technical expertise of SSEN, is working with our communities around a concept that we've called smart and fair neighbourhoods. How do you develop this grid? How do you cluster lots of really small interventions, lots of really small investments around anchor projects in very local areas, in a way that benefits the community, where the community has a value proposition that it can all sign up to, and then how do you offer the actual investments, the actual products from that smart and fair neighbourhood to actual households and actual businesses in a way that they see has value for them? And how do you then write the contracts to make sure that all of that happens? So in the 3 years of Project Leo, we're going to try and scratch the surface of that. We think that Project Leo is the first 3 years of a 10-year effort. But we think that a lot of the concepts and a lot of the trials that we're doing through Project Leo will be fairly immediately replicable in many other communities, and we'll be hoping to work with lots of people on sharing stuff and collaborating with people on how that might work. But the really exciting thing for me in doing Project Leo is that we're suddenly at a point with the climate emergency declarations where everybody understands that we've got 10 to 15 to solve this. We're 10 years out from the feed-in tariff, and we can see the amazing impact that that has had, and we can gain the learning from that. So we actually have major people from Oxford University now standing up on platforms around the world and saying, we know how to do it in Oxfordshire, we know what it will require in Oxfordshire. That is an absolutely amazing position to be in, and we really hope that the investment coming in through the Community Energy Fund to match with the funds coming in from Project Leo to put all of those new investments in the ground will help us to get there.
And shall I just very quickly summarise what it is we're raising funds for right at this moment?
Yeah,
so
that's a good thing to do, actually.
So we have launched a share raise for £1.5 million, which is currently open. We need the funding at the moment to enable us to really ramp up the amount of community-owned renewables that we're going to be, these anchor loads Barbara was talking about. We know that to meet all of our energy needs in terms of electrification of heating and transport is probably going to require a 6-fold increase in the generation of renewable energy. And for us in Oxfordshire, that means solar. So the first thing is we just need to ramp up that amount of generation. This is probably going to mean a lot more ground mount, which is something, if it's going to happen, we want to make sure is happening in a way that local communities can really control the way that it's happening on their doorstep. So for it to be community owned is really important to us, as well as immediately working just like all of our other renewable generation in terms of all those benefits that those are producing. These anchor loads then let us test all of these new smart grid opportunities that Barbara's been talking about, and it's that investment, although not going into paying for those trials, it unlocks the match which allows us to carry them out. So there's kind of a double bang in terms of innovation that's going to be achieved with the money that's invested in us at the moment. I think we're probably very much at the end of our time there, so perhaps we should leave it at that.
Thank you, Barbara and Saskia. Yes, I was just about to give you the flag to wrap up. Thank you very much. We're going to hand straight over to Mark, and then do keep sending your questions, and then I'll direct those to the right person at the end of Mark's session. So Mark, over to you.
Okay, give me a second, see if I can sort this out. And then let me just put that onto. So yeah, hi. So Mark from CoCars. I guess following on from what we just heard about that the future is electric, the future is also absolutely electric from a transport perspective. And I guess what we do as a social enterprise, and we're proud to do it, is to deliver shared transport and electric transport at that. So core point from what we're trying to do is grow shared zero emission mobility in Exeter and South West. We're based in Exeter, but we cover the South West. I'll cover that a bit more about what we do. So I'm just going to touch back and just remember that we are still, as we just discussed, we still have major problems. And no matter whatever comes back after COVID and through COVID, we still have these big major challenges. And transport is the fastest growing impact in this country. It's actually one of the most awkward ones to deal with. And the other low carbon have already touched on the fact of the energy demand that's going to be needed if we're transferring a move from oil to electricity. But it has many other health impacts. And it also has a very inefficient use of our space for people. And I think that's going to be some quite changes that I'm sure we'll have a discussion about. So what do? We offer zero emission mobility. We provide car clubs, we provide hire by the hour, on-demand cars through your app. We have hybrids and increasingly electric cars available in Exeter across the South West. And we also provide on-street electric bikes. We were the first company in the country to deliver on-street docked electric bikes. And we're still the only company in the country that does shared electric cars and electric bikes as a social enterprise. And as any company, never mind the fact that we're actually a social enterprise. The great thing about cars, of course, shared cars, it means you can access cars they start from about £3 to £4 an hour, which is a fantastic way of saving money and saving time. You don't have to have all the hassle of looking after the car, parking it, all those extra costs. That's all done by us. You just need to access it. And that's exactly the same with the bikes as well. You just pay as you use them, which is a really great, and I think we've got to be really consonant of the fact that we're going to be going into some type of recession, and there's going to be, money's going to be tight for people. So there's going to be a lot of rethinking, I think, for people about how they move around. So this is a great opportunity. And it's interestingly, we have customers, though we're geographically in the Southwest, we have customers from all over the UK and other parts of the world that use us and come down, which is a real opportunity. And you just access the car through an app, and then you open the car either with an app or with a card, and with the bike you just open it with an app as well. So it's quite a sort of revolutionary perspective. Here's just, I thought an example is just, here's a dock that's actually at our NHS hospital, which I took just a couple of days ago. We provided our bikes for free for all NHS and key worker staff. which is great to be used in these times, both in terms of commuting and also in terms of getting out and being healthy themselves, which is sections. So some of these docks are larger, some of these are smaller, but this is the one directly outside the RD&E. But our docks and cars are dotted all over the city of Exeter, and the same with our bikes as well, and we're continually growing that service. So just to show wide of our network, we have a multimodal network, so we have bikes and cars. We have bikes based in Exeter, but we are going to be spreading that across different train stations. So we have partnerships with South West Rail, and then we have our cars at South West Rail stations as well. So we are creating effectively a multimodal network, which I believe is something that is a real opportunity for people to trip share. So just for numbers, background, we've got over 1,200 active members. In fact, that's going up. Obviously, that's going up at the moment, with 40 cars, and we've got just under 100 bikes. But we've got orders for more cars and bikes. Saving, and the key thing about our electric cars is not only do we only use zero emission electricity, so we use good energy as a normal standard, it's being shared, they're much more used. So an average car is only used 3% of its time. So if you think of the carbon embodied carbon of that car to produce that car, and it sits around not using it, and the embodied energy to produce an electric car is higher than a normal car, but its lifetime is much cheaper in terms of carbon, then actually when we move forward, shared mobility is something both from a carbon perspective and also from a congestion and also from a grid sharing perspective is something that we'll be going in the future. And that's just not just me saying that, that's highways, that's across the whole, because the future is going to be shared. It's not just going to be owned cars. So yeah, that's why we've got our offer. So what is this offer today? And what we're trying to do? Well, our mission is to become the #1 shared mobility in Exeter and South West. We are the main car club. We're a social enterprise. I guess our key thing is to create affordable shared mobility. You can go and buy an electric car, but currently most people who afford electric cars or bikes have got the money to do that. Whereas we want to create that equitable availability for everybody, very much as was previously stated about equitable access to energy, equitable access to transport. And that's a really important point for mobility for everybody, but also for large and for businesses and for residential. And to create greener, calmer, more connected spaces and more space for people. And that's very much the strategy even before COVID is around. So creating better spaces. Now this is a mock I've just done this is something that's from a design for how the future of Exeter to look at. And we are working with some major developers and putting shared mobility. And I'm quite interesting, even if you just notice the ways people are spaced out in that area, which is quite an interesting point given our perspective. So actually the whole point of a lot of the developments we're working with is to create better space and more place for people, not be overcrowded by cars, which is a really interesting perspective. And we are going to see a shift, and we believe we are that part of the shift to create a valued space, more experience-based place, where it's actually a better place to live. So our ask here is that we're working with Innovate UK. We've got some funding from Innovate UK, and we're looking at this raise to help match this to put out more cars and also to put more bikes into the city and also grow our network across the southwest. Interestingly, this Innovate UK the particular one of them is the fact that these electric charging points will grid share because they're going to use on-street batteries, and they'll be able to use different timing levels, which is a key element so that the strain on the grid is nowhere as high as it is going to would be normally. But obviously the other thing that the reason why Innovate really likes us is obviously we're shared mobility, and obviously shared mobility electric cars means that there's less demand on the grid as well. And more space for people. So that's our primary part of the software, is to grow our bikes and cars. These are sort of partnerships we already have. We already work with some we're working with large house builders and smaller house builders. We deliver sort of mobility hubs, electric car and bike hubs into some of these developments as well as working with partners like the NHS or the universities, etc. And we have a partnership relationship with Stagecoach as well as the two major train operating companies as well. So we want to make the most of this, as we believe it's a real opportunity. I just touched an example, like here in Somerset, we're going to be doing an emergency hub here, which is a high spec development, and other ones. So we get involved in lots of different developments, which I think is a growth market. So yeah, our target, we've actually just did, our deadline is just extended it because of the COVID. We know that we launched a bit later, and we found that obviously people are having to make some decisions. So we've just delayed our deadline, but our target is £600,000. We know we've almost raised £200,000 already, which is great, with a 5% interest rate. So where do we make where does the 5% come from? The point on that is that we put more cars out, we get more people utilization of cars, and therefore we generate income from that, and that's how we can generate our interest rates. And we're seeing more demand than we wish in order to fulfill investment to meet that growth rate. I think I was just going to finish on a slide, because we can't not talk without COVID in our discussion. It's about, our electric bikes. The whole point is create fewer cars, cleaner air, and getting people outside. And we've certainly seen an increasing demand for interest in our electric bikes, especially given this time. There you go.
Thanks, Mark. Well, I love hearing from our businesses, because it just makes me feel so good to be doing what we're doing and to try and help you guys achieve your ambitions. And sometimes, when you're CEO, you can get slightly disconnected from that. So it's great. It's lovely to be doing this. So I'm going to run through some of the questions. Everyone's very animated and engaged, which is brilliant. So let's see if we can get through some of these questions. So the first one, I think, either to Barbara or Saskia, is Project Leo only looking at proven technologies, or are there any sort of specific R&D technologies? And also sort of rolling into that, how are you adapting to the removal of or reduction of feed-in tariff as well?
Okay, so the first thing to say is that Project Leo isn't about technical innovation. So we're not, we're working with the proven technologies we have. In Innovate UK terms, if anyone's familiar with that, we're in the experimental development stage, which means that we're just pre-commercial. We're not at the blue skies end. What Project Leo is trying to do is to work out how you put all of those technologies together in a way that keeps the grid safe. So trialing the flexibility services, so managing the peak, particularly in the evening, reducing that hopefully, sharing capacity between grid capacity, or connection capacity between installations, all sorts of different ways of sharing the grid in a way that doesn't mean that it needs to have huge new investment put into it. And so the innovation is about demonstrating to the grid and to Ofgem that you can do that without causing burnouts or blackouts. Secondly, how you govern all of that through a market and through contracts in a way that is verifiable on the one hand and accessible on the other hand. Is that helpful? And the second question was, sorry, what was the second bit of that?
And our models.
Post-fit, yes. So Leo is also about how you stack value. That's a lot of people are talking about that at the moment. So the feed-in tariff has gone. Partly it should have gone because technology costs have gone right down, although it was slightly premature. How do we get value out of not just selling energy to the host or to the grid through a PPA? Can you have smart PPAs? Can you have contracts for switching down when the grid is constrained or switching up when it's got capacity and demand? And how can you write contracts in a way that makes that whole stack of value investable? So Project Leo is very much about the post-FIT world, and we expect to come out of it with a much better understanding of what those value stacks are. And the grant funding that comes in from Innovate UK keeps the projects that we're developing safe through the whole course of their life. So it's essentially risk money coming in from the government to help us develop all of that and test it out.
Great, thank you, Barbara. And PPA is power purchase agreement.
Purchase agreement, yes.
Jargon buster.
And so one of the things that we're hoping to do through Project Leo is to work out how you could do a local power purchase agreement where local institutions could be buying from local generation assets, but without needing to have actual electrons passing from one to the other.
Right, thank you. Okay, so question for Mark. So right in the nuts and bolts of it, do shareholders get preferential higher rates? When will the Plymouth operation go live, and what's the minimum age for drivers to rent your EVs? Let's take those together.
Okay, shareholders, well, we had a long debate actually about this, but we decided that actually, no, if you want to invest in the company, then that's great, and you would have the access. If you become a member, then obviously then you have, you can either become pay-as-you-go or join as a more corporate member, then you can get reduced rates. But what we are looking at doing is putting a membership bike and car package together. So it's a bit like a, you know, like a mobile phone package offer. That's something we're looking to develop further. So at the moment, there's no preferential rates if you become a shareholder. Second thing on Plymouth, we have a couple of cars down in Plymouth, and we are working with a developer. We're putting another couple of cars into one development, and then we've got some electric cars going in a couple of months. Unfortunately, they was actually due to go in March, but obviously that's all been delayed. So we're hoping to have those put in as soon as we're able to do it. And that particular developer is actually going back onto site this week. They actually closed all of their developments down around the country. So that is the side. I think there was a third question. What was the third? Sorry, the third question.
Minimum age for rental?
Okay, for cars, the minimum age is 21. For bikes, it's 16.
Lovely, thank you very much. So there's a question for both of you, just briefly, if you could both answer. Barbara first, maybe, and then Mark. So it was actually directed to Mark, but I think it's quite relevant for both. It's, you know, what's the risk of commercial car share schemes outcompeting the social enterprise model as the shared mobility model rolls out more widely? And there was another question about legal structure. So perhaps you both could comment on what your legal structure is and why you chose that, not in terms of technicalities, but from a sort of ethical point of view. Barbara first. Okay,
so the simple question first, we're the low carbon, the thing that we're inviting investment into is the Low Carbon Hub IPS Limited, which is a community benefit society. And we chose that because we wanted the profit to be owned by the community, which is why shareholder payments get paid out as interest. And in terms of private sector competition, absolutely. It's big scale and big money is always going to be a really difficult competitive issue for our social enterprises, because it's always going to be available to come in to take our space. One of the things that we're trying to explore through Project Leo is how we work more closely with pension funds as they have more requirement on them from government to prove environmental outcomes, which they currently do, and in the future, as we expect them to do to prove social outcomes, we're hoping that there'll be a partnership to develop there that we can show to everybody.
Mark?
Okay, yeah, so governance, first of all, we're exactly the same. as Low Carbon Hub, community and benefit society, that's fine, and very much for the same reasons. From a commercial perspective, yes, but it's been interesting. If you look at the bike share market, you saw pieces like Mobike arrive, the Chinese arrived, and then they all went bust because they overextend themselves, driven by VC funding, looking to land grab. And that does happen. Bird recently with their scooters have made up over 500 people. So the private sector isn't perfect. It has a habit of over-investing in venture funding to lead it off in one particular way and then not really thinking about what the real market is. So I think that's one thing. I think as a small company, we're more agile. As I was saying, we do bikes and cars. No one else does that in the country. And so as a consequence, we have been able to work with large developers. Persimmons is quite a large developer, and we work with other medium and smaller size developers where we can actually meet their requirements and be flexible enough to do that. And I think that's a really important point, because I always think that social enterprises are highly innovative because we have to be, otherwise we wouldn't survive, both socially and technologically. So I think that's, and also from our business perspective. And I think also, I guess from our perspective, we're not for profit. So we're not here to create large profits from our operations. We're ultimately trying to deliver services to the community, back to our stakeholders. So that's where we focus ourselves. And I guess we have more of a place-based approach. If you look at other car clubs, they are a car club and they look at mass car clubs. They don't think about the place and the space around the area. So we look at it more from a spatial perspective. So it's a different business model with a different approach. Yeah,
thank you. Okay, staying with you, Mark, and then we'll go back to Low Carbon Hub. So it is quite a nitty-gritty question. So what is the investment term for both projects, and are the shares withdrawable? So obviously we support a lot of social enterprises who are in this format of either a cooperative or a community benefit society, and they do have this product, which is a withdrawable share, which does what it says on the tin. You ask for the withdrawal of your capital from the community benefit society or cooperative, and each organisation generally tends to have a specific set of rules that defines the governance. So every model is slightly different. So perhaps Mark and then Saskia could just talk about how people can take their money out at a point in time if they so choose.
Yeah, we've said that you have minimum investments of 18 months with us, and then post that you are able to request to withdraw your shares, and then shares are withdrawable through a process that can withdraw your shares. And that can, and that's I think we set a decision time by the board and AGM to make that decision, and then you're able to remove your shares. So yeah, there is a process, and it's all defined in the share offer document. Absolutely, things change with people, so absolutely people are able to move their in now, but there is an initial 1.5 years of committed to, so we're able to actually know we have that money there, so we can invest and generate income, which hopefully means that you're willing to stay.
Thanks, Mark. Saskia?
So anyone who's invested in community energy projects before will be aware that normally they're very capital intensive and long-term projects. So traditionally you would put in your investment and your capital would be modelled to be returned to you over a 20 to 25 year period. And that's certainly how our original investments were. When we set up the Community Energy Fund, we responded to interest from our existing investors who are looking for a shorter term opportunity to withdraw their capital. So the way that it now works is that once you've had your investment in the fund for a minimum of 4 years, you then have the right to request your capital to be returned. And we in the share offer document, we set out very clearly the rules and the way that we prioritise investment. We have to be really clear. We can't guarantee that we'd be able to return everyone's capital at that point, but we have made a commitment to make some capital available at that point and set out how we would prioritise. If you don't withdraw your capital, you then see a boost in your interest rate from us. So the target 5% that we're offering kicks in at that 4-year period. Up until that point, it's 4 years. So we hope people will view investing in us as a really long-term commitment to supporting our aims. But like Mark said, we recognise people's financial situations change, and people may need that capital sooner. So we've tried to create a mechanism to make that possible.
Saskia, can I just add that if people don't request their capital back, then that will be invested in new projects that will then generate the capital to pay your capital back. So it operates as an evergreen fund, basically, over as long as we are around for, and our pipeline is generating. So we're assuming an ever-increasing pipeline and an ever-increasing pot of shareholders, and each project that goes into the fund is modelled for the length of time it'll take to return the capital. So we're managing it as single projects within an overall portfolio, but but we're not keeping the capital as money in the bank. It's always reinvested if the shareholders don't want it back. And
interestingly, that's also helped answer some of the a request from our investors, where we started to pay back capital on some of our other projects, and people said, we don't want it back, we want it to carry on doing what we'd originally invested, and we want it to be out there continuing to tackle climate change. So we were able to reflect that as well with the fund.
Great, thank you. And I think it's just worth noting that, I talked a little bit at the start about, volatility of stock markets, and, one of the reasons why these types of social enterprises do quite well, actually, in terms of delivering the projects and delivering real impact, is that they have got a support base of investors who are very patient. And actually, this type of patient capital is absolutely critical to creating a number of these sustainable development projects, and actually is quite unique, I would say, as well, because there is a lot of short-term debt available, which can be quite expensive and not really helpful to social enterprises. So having the crowd invest and be very patient is exactly what is needed to make this transition to a low carbon economy. So thank you, folks, and keep doing it. We are past our 45 minutes. We've still got some questions. There are a number of quite specific ones to Mark, actually, about the specifics of your sort of terms and conditions, and can you come to certain areas, and I mean, all good news, basically. You need to obviously grow a lot faster to keep up with demand. So that's always refreshing. So what I might do, I think, is say we'll do one more question for both of you. And then if there are any other specific questions that we haven't got to, we can follow up after the webinar with an email. And as I said previously as well, there's a lot of more information on the website as well that people can refer to, and in the share offer documents. So a question to both. Start with Mark. It's about impact, really, and there was a question about whether you had an idea of how many cars your model takes off the road, basically, how many private cars are displaced by co-cars.
Okay, so yes, we do. So there's national stats and there's London stats. We have done our own stats. So one car takes 7 cars off the road. So we've modelled that. We've done that both through consumer surveys and also with some research ourselves. There's also from National Co-Mobility, which is a national trade body for shared mobility. states it's between 7 to 10 cars. In a bigger city like London, then your one car is more likely to take more cars off the road. So that goes that. And with that, and as the average car is, I can get data heavy if we want to, but the average car is 128 grams of CO2 per kilogram. So per kilometre. So the average car generates that. Given all the cars we're talking about will have zero emission, then that's quite a substantial amount of cars off the road. And it's just, I think it's just worth thinking. It's not about thinking about cars, it's about the space in front of you. What would it be like if you walked out of your house and there were 7 less cars there and there was only one car club? What space would that do? What would that do about the feeling of the space? How children would act? Would people, you know, there's more people cycling now. Why is that? Because there's more space. There's better air quality. It's about, can we move to that space? And I guess that's what we're trying to create. So that's, I guess that's the question.
Thanks. Barbara, are you going to take that one in terms of, you know, key benefits?
I think that beyond the ones that we already measure and we send out to shareholders every year, and that Saskia and her team work really hard to get the evidence and verify that in terms of people, planet, prosperity. I think I would emphasize the benefit of the innovation we can now get involved in doing. So we actually get invited to do things like sit on the steering group for the energy strategy for Oxfordshire, contribute to the Citizens' Assembly for climate emergency in our local area as well. And with Project Leo, we're now putting flesh on the bones of those strategies to say, actually, this is how we are going to do it. Not can we do it, or why would we do it, or it's no, we got to do it, and yeah, actually, this is how we're going to do it. And then the social enterprise model means that we then share that innovation in a way that most private companies would want to hold it close. Mm-hmm. And the societal benefit of sharing innovation, I think, is something we haven't really got into as a social enterprise sector yet, but maybe we should.
I think it's quite interesting that actually, I think a lot of the time we're actually doing stakeholder innovation. We're actually developing and helping people understand how you can co-create different things, both structurally and socially as well. And often it's out there that people just need some way of enabling that to happen. And I think that's what social enterprises focus on, because that's very much our priority, I guess.
Yeah, I've got to say, I'm always really heartened by seeing the difference of when people come together, what collective action can bring. And particularly on an issue like the global issue of climate change, where as an individual you may not feel you can do very much, when you start putting your money together with people, putting your time and your effort together with people, and start seeing all the impact that all those individual actions add up to, for me that's really heartening.
I think there's one thing I'd just like to add as well, which goes back to the question about what's the difference between the private sector. I'm working with a couple of clients who are house builders. You know, they're not large scale, they're medium-sized house builders. They want to work with someone who's a for-purpose company that has a purpose, is driven, and is not just someone who's out to maximize profit. And that was the specific request that they stated, that I want someone with a for-purpose who can actually be a partner with us on our journey. And that was really, really important, I think. And also I find that people want to work for you if you have a for-purpose approach as well, which I'm sure is the same with the Low Carbon Hub as well. And I think you've got some really good people working for us, and really good directors because of that purpose perspective.
Absolutely. So thank you all for contributing to our first Cuppa Club this week, and thank you everybody for being so engaged. So I totally agree with what Saskia said in terms of collective action. And if you think of collective action also as the action of positive investing and creating this community of investors that wants to build a more sustainable future, then significant plug for Ethex. People are asking for more information on the businesses. Please do go to the website ethex.org.uk and check out the share offer documents, read more about the organisations. We'll send up a follow-up email as well. We'll be having more of these as well, just to showcase all of the brilliant businesses and incredible things that you're doing. Thank you everybody for joining. I think these are absolutely wonderful. So can't wait to do the next one. Thanks everybody.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you very much,
Thanks for
everyone.
listening.
Bye.
Great. Bye.